My name is Eli Ward, and I am not a pilot. I want to say that clearly, right at the start, because everything that happened afterward makes no sense unless you understand that fact first. I was a maintenance tech, third class, assigned to cargo systems on the Concorde relay station, orbiting a dead orange star. I fixed pipes, I patched hull seals. I was, by every measure that mattered to the alien officers around me, the least important person on that station. So when the vessel Ashenwake refused to fly, nobody thought of me. The Ashenwake was not an ordinary ship. It was old, older than any record the Concorde kept. A silver spine of a vessel pulled from a dead system decades before I was born. Nobody knew who built it. The engineers who studied it said its core was not machine and not mind, but something between the two, grown rather than built. For years it had sat in dry dock, inactive, because nobody could make it respond. Then, 3 months before I arrived, it had suddenly powered on for a Velmari commander named Senatha Vosk, and the Concorde had spent every day since trying to understand why. I only knew the ship as gossip. The techs down in cargo talked about it during breaks, the way people talk about a locked door nobody can open. They said it had chosen its pilot. They said it had a will of its own. I remember laughing at that, because I did not believe machines could want anything. Then the alarms came, and I stopped laughing. It happened on a quiet shift, the kind where nothing is supposed to happen. A distress signal reached the station from a research outpost 2 systems away, a colony of scientists and their families caught in the path of a rogue asteroid cluster that had slipped past every early warning system the Concorde had built. The cluster would reach the outpost in 6 hours. Every fast ship in range was already committed elsewhere, chasing pirates or escorting diplomats, or doing whatever ships do when disaster picks the worst possible moment to arrive. The only vessel close enough, fast enough, was the Ashenwake, and the Ashenwake would not fly. Commander Vosk tried first. I was not there, but I heard about it later from a tech named Orin, a soft-spoken Velmari with pale blue skin who worked beside me in cargo. He said the commander sat in the pilot's chair for nearly 20 minutes, speaking commands, entering codes, pressing her hand against every panel the ship offered. Nothing happened. The lights stayed dim. The core stayed silent. Then the ship's chief engineer tried, and after him, 3 more officers, each one more senior than the last. The Ashenwake did not respond to any of them. By the time I heard about the outpost and the asteroid cluster and the ship that refused to move, only 2 hours remained. I was in the cargo bay, welding a cracked coupling, when Orin came running down the corridor, out of breath, his eyes wide. "They need bodies," he said. "Anyone. Everyone. They are trying every crew member on the station in that chair, hoping something works." "Why would that help?" I asked. "Nobody knows," he said. "But they are out of ideas, and out of time." I want to be honest. I did not go to the Ashenwake because I believed I could help. I went because Orin asked me to come, and because standing in a cargo bay while people 2 systems away waited for rescue felt unbearable. I was not brave. I was just close by, and I did not want to be the kind of person who stayed behind when something needed doing. The ship's bridge was larger than I expected. A curved chamber, lit by a soft gray light that seemed to come from the walls themselves rather than any fixture I could see. The pilot's chair sat at the center, surrounded by panels that pulsed faintly, like something breathing. Commander Vosk stood beside it, her uniform sharp, her face tired in a way that alien faces rarely showed to humans. She looked at me, this small human in a stained work jumpsuit, and I saw the exhaustion behind her eyes give way, just for a moment, to something like desperation. "You are cargo crew," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Commander." "Sit," she said. "We have tried everyone else." I did not feel chosen. I felt like the last name on a list nobody wanted to read. I walked to the chair and sat down, and the moment my hands touched the armrests, the ship changed. I will try to describe it honestly, because I have told this story many times since, and each time I feel the words fall short. The gray light around the bridge brightened, not suddenly, but the way a room brightens when clouds pass from the sun. The panels that had pulsed faintly now glowed steady and warm. Somewhere beneath my feet, through the floor and the chair and my own 2 hands, I felt a low hum begin, like a great animal waking from a long sleep. Commander Vosk made a sound I had never heard from a Velmari before, Something between a gasp and a question. "What did you do?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, because it was true. I had done nothing except sit down. The panels in front of me arranged themselves into shapes I could almost understand, symbols shifting toward something simpler, as if the ship itself was trying to meet me halfway. I did not know how to fly a starship. I want to repeat that, because it matters. I had never trained for this, but when I reached out, uncertain, and let my hand rest against the console the way I might rest a hand against the shoulder of a frightened animal, the console responded to me. Not to my knowledge, to my presence. "The outpost," I said. "The asteroid cluster. Can you show me?" A screen unfolded above the console, and there it was, the research outpost, small and fragile, and the cluster of rock and ice tumbling toward it, closer than I had imagined. Less than 2 hours remained. Commander Vosk stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "The ship will not respond to my commands. It has never fully responded to anyone, but it is responding to you. I do not understand why, and I do not have time to understand why. Can you fly it?" I almost said no. Every honest part of me wanted to say no, because I was not qualified, because I had never sat in a chair like this in my life, because the idea of guiding a starship through open space to save a colony of strangers felt like something that happened to other people, braver people, trained people. But the ship was humming under my hands, warm and alive and waiting, and somewhere out there, families were watching a wall of rock and ice grow larger in their sky. "I don't know," I said, "but I'll try." The commander did not argue. She took the seat beside me instead, the co-pilot's chair, and began speaking rapid instructions about trajectory and thrust, and the strange non-standard controls the Ashen Wake seemed to prefer. I listened, and I acted, and somewhere in the space between her knowledge and my instinct, the ship began to move. It was unlike anything I had felt before. The other vessels I had worked on groaned and shuddered when they accelerated, metal complaining against the strain. The Ashen Wake simply went, smooth and certain, as though it had been waiting its whole long life for someone to simply ask it to try. I found that if I did not overthink my movements, if I let my hands move the way they wanted to move rather than the way a manual might have told them to move, the ship answered faster, cleaner, more willing. "Fascinating," Commander Vosk murmured, watching the readouts. "It responds to intention before command. I have never seen a system built this way." "Maybe it isn't built," I said, thinking of what the techs had said in the cargo bay, about the ship being grown rather than made. Maybe it's more like it's grown to trust something, and it just never found the right thing to trust before. She looked at me for a long moment, and did not answer, because the cluster was close now, close enough that the screen filled with tumbling shapes of rock and dust, close enough that alarms across the outpost's own systems were surely screaming by now. I will not pretend the next part was calm. It was not. I had to guide the ship through a narrow channel between the largest fragments, fast enough to reach the outpost before the cluster did, but careful enough not to be struck by debris moving faster than sound. Commander Vosk called out distances and angles, numbers I barely had time to process, and I flew mostly on feeling, the way you might duck under a low branch without stopping to measure its height. Twice the ship shuddered as smaller fragments grazed the outer hull, and twice I felt my own heart lurch with it, as though the ship's fear and mine had become the same fear. "There," Vosk said, pointing. "The outpost. I saw it on the screen. Small domes clustered on a rocky moon, shield generators flickering weakly against the coming storm of debris. The shields would not hold. Even I could see that. The ship has a deflection field," Vosk said quickly. "It has never been used, not in any record we have. I do not know if it still functions." "Then let's find out," I said, and I reached for the controls, the way I had reached for everything else since sitting in that chair. Without full understanding, but with full trust. The Ashen Wake answered. A wide, shimmering field spread out from the ship's hull, catching the smaller fragments of the cluster and turning them gently aside, like a hand redirecting a stream of water rather than blocking it outright. The larger pieces we could not stop, but we could guide the ship itself between them and the outpost, absorbing what the shields on the ground could not. The next few minutes felt longer than the rest of my life combined. I do not remember every choice I made. I remember the hum of the ship, steady beneath my hands, and the voice of Commander Vosk beside me, and the slow, terrible beauty of rock and ice sliding past the viewport, close enough to touch, close enough to end everything, and somehow, impossibly, missing. When the cluster had passed, when the outpost's domes sat quiet and whole on their little moon, I let go of the console and found that my hands were shaking. Commander Vosk did not speak for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "In 3 months, I could not make this ship move a single meter. You sat down, and it woke." "I don't have an answer for you," I said honestly. "I'm not special. I'm cargo crew. I fix pipes." "Perhaps," she said, "that is exactly why it chose you. You did not come to this chair expecting it to obey you. You came to help, without demanding anything in return. Every officer who sat here before you came expecting command. You simply came ready to try." I thought about that for a long time afterward, in the quiet weeks that followed, as the Concorde's engineers studied the Ashenwake's response to me with growing fascination, and as word spread through the station about the cargo tech who had flown the ship nobody could fly. I was not made a commander. I did not suddenly become someone important. I went back to fixing pipes and patching hull seals. Mostly, though I was asked, from time to time, to sit in that chair again, and each time, the ship woke for me the way it had that first day. I still do not fully understand why. Maybe Commander Vosk was right, and it was never about skill or training, only about how I arrived. Maybe there was something in the simple, stubborn willingness of a human heart that the ship had been waiting to feel, something it could not find in careful calculation or practiced command. I only know that on a quiet day, in a chair I had no right to sit in, a ship that had refused every skilled hand offered to it, chose instead the one person who came without expecting anything at all, and together, we saved a colony of strangers who never learned my name. That is enough for me. It always will be.